a young boy burdened by serious mental health struggles, discovered within himself a class of legendary, godlike power. Despite everything, his classmates ridiculed him, claiming that his future was already destroyed. In the end, his awakened class turned out to be nothing more than a basic life skill. He was assigned the role of a butcher, destined to spend his days slaughtering pigs without end. What remained hidden from them was the truth reflected in the boy's gaze. Each of them appeared as if they were stubborn beasts, their faces twisted in a noisy, almost monstrous way. Within the walls of First People's Hospital, each person found themselves seated opposite a woman who was a doctor, her eyes framed by rimless glasses. The warmth of summer had seeped into her white coat, hinting at the outline of her figure beneath the fabric. Once the doctor finished reviewing Yi's medical file, a deep frown formed on her face as doubt flickered in her gaze. No matter which living creature appeared before him, they all took on the appearance of pigs in his eyes, even the person standing right in front of him. Everyone agreed by nodding their heads in unison. She looked at the boy and thought it was unfortunate someone so good-looking faced such a sad fate. The woman doctor loosened the buttons on her white coat and spread it apart. Drawing nearer to Yi, the distance between their faces grew smaller. Now the character wondered what appeared before their eyes. There were 2 pigs. At the sound of his answer, a sudden rush of excitement surged through her, prompting her to quickly begin checking Yi's physical condition. She proceeded to jot down in the patient's chart that his physical health was fine, but he lacked attraction to adult women. Naturally, she reasoned, it would be strange for him to feel desire if all women appeared to him as pigs. She believed she understood the reason behind why everyone seemed like a pig to him. The doctor let out a sigh as she studied the scan in her hand, realizing that the patient's spine had a severe problem. She reached for a model of the spine nearby and gestured toward it, explaining that the patient's backbone was badly misshapen, putting pressure on both the cranial and optic nerves. Because of this, the patient's vision was distorted, causing them to perceive everyone as pigs. The doctors explained that surgery was the sole option to fix the problem, but warned that the procedure carried serious risks. They cautioned that if something went wrong, paralysis from the neck down could be the result. Gazed at the stubborn-looking person dressed in a white lab coat standing in front of him and gave a hesitant nod, signaling that he only partially grasped what was being said. He extended his hand toward the doctor, signaling that their conversation was over and requesting the return of his spine. The woman doctor stood motionless for a moment, her expression troubled as she jotted down a note in the patient's chart, indicating that the mental state was highly irregular. A short time after, exited the hospital and climbed onto a bus bound for his school. From his earliest memories, he had always seen the faces of those around him as pigs. Some might have called it an illness, but for him, it hardly made any difference in how he went about his day. When it came to picking someone to be with, Yi always hesitated. He could never bring himself to fall for just anyone, especially not someone he found unappealing. He had wanted to resolve the issue before the job change ceremony, but it was obvious that he wouldn't be able to do so in time. Made her way back to the familiar halls of high school. A girl, notable for her height and elegance, hurried in his direction. He arrived at last, easing the other person's worries. Relief washed over them as they confessed how anxious they'd been, even joking that if Yi had shown up any later, a scolding might have followed. Pretended to be upset, her cheeks swelling as she shook her small pink fist in the air. To Yi, she appeared simply as a pink pig upright on 2 legs, energetically waving its hooves. Whispers and quiet laughter rippled through the crowd as people watched. Many noticed how stayed close to Yi, just as she always did. Observers remarked to each other about how the pair constantly showed off their close bond from childhood. Everyone knew they had grown up side by side, inseparable like twins. Some even speculated that the two would probably marry as soon as the job change ceremony ended. Surrounded by playful taunts from those nearby, Ling's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of red. Despite her embarrassment, she remained steadfast beside Yi, looking up at him with unwavering devotion, as though drawing all her bravery from his presence. Goosebumps prickled across skin as he realized a pig's head was gazing at him with unmistakable affection. He figured most people would have reacted just like he did in that bizarre situation. A hush fell over the crowd as the principal's firm instructions rang out, directing everyone to arrange themselves in order by their student numbers for the start of the awakening ceremony. At the heart of the plaza stood before a gleaming dark crystal that shimmered with vibrant colors, resembling the beauty of a night filled with stars. Within this world, three main attributes governed one's potential: strength, agility, and spirit. Individuals with higher statistics in these areas stood a better chance of awakening into a more advanced class. Gaining the power of an elite warrior felt as if one had challenged destiny, similar to achieving the rare honor of succeeding in the imperial examinations centuries ago. The initial student moved ahead, excitement clear in their expression. When the room fell quiet, the awakening crystal shimmered faintly, casting a soft white glow. Principal Ming revealed the outcome with composure, stating that the profession was a life class intermediate fitter. The student sank to his knees, his body giving in as though every ounce of hope had vanished from within him. The next student approached, identified as a low-ranking engineer with a life class profession. After that, a third and a fourth appeared, followed by more than 20 others in succession, but every single one of them awakened only to professions related to daily life. At last, as the 24th student approached the altar, the awakening crystal burst forth in a dazzling display of golden light. Principal Ming's eyes gleamed with a sudden golden shine. He recognized that this was an uncommon class profession. Even though it belonged to the life category, someone graduating in it could easily make tens of thousands each month, far surpassing the average. Ming's anticipation skyrocketed the moment he learned which class it was. It turned out to be a rare combat profession, shadowless. The teacher, eyes alight with interest, asked the student to state his name. Recognizing the rarity of such a class, Ming felt sure that this young man was destined to become one of high school's top achievers. Introduced himself to the principal. Ming considered the name to be impressive. He encouraged the young man to get some rest, reassuring him that he would later visit his family in person to discuss what lay ahead. With a supportive gesture, Ming gave a friendly pat on the shoulder. His voice quivered with excitement as he expressed his gratitude to the principal, fully aware that his life had taken a new direction from that moment onward. The awakening ceremony carried on with excitement, eventually reaching the moment for Yi to step forward. Ling's face turned bright red as she silently urged Yi to do his best. Inhaled slowly before moving forward onto the altar. Despite understanding that he was likely to receive just an ordinary life class profession, he couldn't let go of his last bit of hope. While most people possessed only 3 stat points in total, his attributes added up to an impressive 10. With more than 3 times the usual amount, he wondered if fate might grant him a miracle. As soon as he touched the awakening crystal, a significant moment unfolded. A towering beam of crimson light shot upward, piercing the sky with a thunderous force. The audience reacted with surprise, their voices rising in hushed whispers as they exchanged confused glances. No one seemed to understand what the red light meant. Among them, someone recalled that legendary classes were known for their black glow, epic ones shone with purple, rare classes gave off a yellow light, while the common ranks simply glimmered white. Principal almost collapsed in shock. She realized that someone had truly achieved a god-tier status. High school had managed to nurture a student who reached the pinnacle of their profession. Throughout his long career as principal, had never encountered anything as rare as a legendary class. But now, as he approached retirement, destiny granted him a miraculous god-tier awakening. It felt as if the heavens themselves were showering him with favor. Perhaps, with this incredible stroke of luck, a promotion awaited him before his departure. Upon witnessing Yi's true class for the first time, Ming stood motionless with shock. The title revealed itself as a life class profession, God-tier butcher. His jaw tightened and his breathing grew ragged, his chest rising and falling rapidly as if he might run out of air. After all his anticipation for a top-tier profession, he ended up with a life-type job, a butcher of all possible outcomes. He wondered if fate was taunting him, since professions of such rare caliber were beyond value. Master blacksmiths, healers, and alchemists held abilities so extraordinary that even the most powerful warriors would humble themselves to earn their goodwill. No sane person would ever lower themselves before someone who simply slaughtered pigs for a living. Even the most skilled butcher was still nothing more than a butcher at the end of the day. Comparing them to someone extraordinary was like decorating an old GTX 1060 graphics card with precious gems. Despite all the embellishments, it could never compete with the power of a 4090. Principal Ming exhaled deeply, weighed down by disappointment. He had placed high hopes on Yi, expecting something extraordinary, yet reality had turned those hopes into a painful letdown. No one seemed shocked by the outcome. It was only natural for this child to inherit the title, just as a general's offspring would step into their parents' role. Similarly, the son of a scapegoat was expected to face the same fate, and nobody questioned when a butcher's child followed in those footsteps. He accessed his class panel, examining the list of talents and skills displayed. Among them were Swine Bane and Divine Butcher's Blade. The butcher skill, Swine Bane, granted him an extra 50% damage against pigs. With every pig he defeated, this bonus grew by 1%. Additionally, any damage he received from pigs was reduced by half. The Divine Butcher's Blade allowed the user to select any weapon to serve as their butcher's knife. With each pig slain by this chosen blade, the wielder would receive an additional 0.1 free attribute points. As for the Blood Shadow Butcher ability, it gave the user the power to release a terrifying aura of murderous intent, causing all pigs nearby to experience a full second of overwhelming fear. Upon reviewing his own abilities, found himself taken aback by the extraordinary power of a god-tier butcher. This rare status offered him a pair of talents that could evolve without bounds, especially when and the Divine Butcher's Blade were combined. With these gifts, not even the strongest pig would likely survive a single blow from him. Unfortunately, these remarkable skills were limited to being effective solely against pigs. Realized that madness was not a debt he owed anyone. He saw the world as a place crowded with fools. With this thought, he prepared himself to begin the hunt. He descended from the altar, his expression serene, while a torrent of emotions, astonishment, contempt, ridicule, sympathy, and a bitter sense of satisfaction swirled within him, each feeling cutting into his heart like sharp knives. The hope of gaining a legendary profession had filled him with excitement, but discovering he was destined to be a mere butcher left him stunned by the vast difference between his dreams and harsh reality. Jinglong sneered, his eyes sparkling with open delight, as he expressed his disappointment that Qing Shanghai had not produced a true dragon after all, but only a mere pig slayer. Everyone agreed, remarking that all the excitement was over nothing more than a mere butcher finding it laughable. They regarded as the only genuine dragon of. As soon as finished, the others eagerly added their support. He received reassurance that awakening as a god to his butcher was simply a way of continuing his father's legacy. The words suggested that Uncle Yi would surely feel proud, and that the speaker's own father would also be pleased. As laughter echoed around them, quietly stood on her toes and softly rested her hand on Yi's head, offering comfort where others only ridiculed. The group each gave a composed nod, confirming that he and lived next door to each other. Since both of their parents worked in life-class professions, the families had subtly expressed their hopes of pairing the two together for quite some time. From the time they were young, Yi could only see as unattractive, comparing her appearance to that of a pig, and no matter how hard he tried, he simply couldn't bring himself to develop any romantic feelings for her. It was now her turn. Glanced at Yi with a mischievous glint in her eyes, wondering aloud whether she would inherit her mother's skills as a tailor or her father's expertise as a brewer. With a playful gesture, she stuck out her petite pink tongue before moving confidently toward the awakening altar. The moment her foot made contact with the altar, without warning, an unusual event occurred as a towering column of thick, dark light burst upward, stretching into the heavens and plunging everyone's faces into deep shadow. In an instant, the once loud playground grew completely quiet. Shocked faces stared with jaws dropped and eyes wide, frozen in surprise, until one loud voice finally broke the hush. A legendary class had just been awakened, leaving everyone in awe. Principal Ming could hardly believe his eyes. His mouth hung open as he gazed in astonishment at the glowing beam. Ming could hardly believe it. After being assigned a worthless god-tier class, he now feared his legendary reward would be just as disappointing. Anxiety raced through his chest as his heart hammered with dread. A wave of shock swept through the crowd, rendering them speechless. After witnessing a god-tier achievement, they now saw a legendary feat unfold. Qin was breaking records unlike anyone before, capturing the attention of every onlooker as he stood poised beneath the shadowy beam. Under the black light's eerie glow, his beauty became even more captivating, her presence wrapped in an enigmatic aura that pulled everyone's attention toward her. Ming's cheeks turned bright with excitement as he read the words: Combat profession, legendary tier, frost soul, sword immortal. He almost jumped out of his seat, barely able to contain himself. It had been ages since anyone in Qing had awakened a legendary combat class. In fact, even someone gaining an epic combat class would have sparked celebrations and festivities throughout the entire city. Came from a family where both of her parents belonged to the life class profession, making her situation unusual and sparking questions about a possible awakening mutation. Observing this, Ming wasted no time and hurried over, assuring that she could rely on for full support with anything she might require. Offered the principal a courteous smile, dipped her head respectfully, and then descended elegantly from the altar. At that instant, the attention of everyone in the school converged on her. She had become the undeniable focus of their universe. Despite this, everyone kept their distance, too intimidated to try gaining her approval. From that point forward, it was clear to all that Su's path would split away from the rest, each journeying forward like parallel lines destined never to cross again. Everyone applauded with cheerful expressions, their smiles showing true happiness for her achievement. His name lingered in the air as a subtle, difficult-to-define look crossed his eyes, revealing an emotion she herself struggled to understand. The character acknowledged that misunderstandings had occurred between them in the past, but believed those issues were now resolved since they no longer belonged to the same world. Every gaze in the room shifted toward Yi, their expressions a mix of amusement and satisfaction at his misfortune. Once celebrated as an unrivaled butcher and famed warrior, Yi now stood isolated. The deep bond he shared with his childhood love had shattered in a single moment. Life's unpredictable nature revealed itself through its constant ups and downs. Those who had discovered they possessed only ordinary, non-combat jobs suddenly found comfort in their own fates, realizing that their situation was not as unfortunate as Yi's. He gave a composed nod, yet to and everyone watching, his calmness looked like a fragile mask barely hiding the turmoil from his recent collapse. Regarded him with a hint of pity in her eyes, her voice growing gentle as she pointed out that, although this news was surely devastating, he was nothing more than a butcher and would never achieve anything remarkable, insisting that he had only himself to blame. She glanced elsewhere, silently deciding that ending things quickly would be best for both of them. In her thoughts, she resolved to tell her parents everything and wished that would not hold on to her any longer, hoping to prevent him from developing unrealistic expectations. Found himself at a loss for words as the pig scolded him for holding on. The situation struck him as completely ridiculous. Without glancing behind, he spun around and strode off, quietly glad to have finally shaken off the bothersome pig. His eyes glinted with anticipation as he moved closer, clearly ready to confront the situation and force his adversary to acknowledge the truth. He believed that if he joined forces with, renowned for her exceptional combat abilities, and combined them with his own uncommon battle skills, they could achieve a future filled with honor and fame. After brushed him off, leaving him feeling humiliated, redirected his anger toward. He called out to, demanding that the butcher's son come over. He stood lost in thought, his mind preoccupied with where he might find pigs for his next slaughter. So absorbed was he in his own plans that he failed to notice speaking to him. Witnessing Yi's total disregard, his eyes narrowed, a sharp and threatening light flickering within them, offended that a simple butcher would dare to overlook his presence. He already resented for taking the attention away from him before, but now his anger erupted. Addressing, he demanded a response, questioning whether was ignoring him on purpose and insisting that leaving wouldn't be that simple. His words rang out with an icy, threatening tone. Raised his gaze, his expression serene as he looked at the pig head positioned in front of him, silently urging it to move. A single look struck with a bone-chilling fear, making him feel as if a dangerous predator had chosen him as its next target. His body jerked backward without warning, causing him to stagger a few paces before he finally crumpled to the floor. In that moment, he was overcome by a sense of helplessness. as if he were a bound animal lying defenseless on the butcher's block, dreading the imminent strike of the blade. His cheeks burned a deep red as embarrassment him. All traces of his usual calm vanished, replaced by visible distress. The realization struck him hard. He had been so frightened by a mere butcher that he'd ended up collapsing to the floor. He sneered at the other, dismissing him as worthless trash. Outraged by the defiant glare directed his way, he scoffed at the idea that someone so low, just a pig slayer, would dare challenge him. In his eyes, the other had no right to act so boldly. Overwhelmed by fury, charged ahead, driving his fist forcefully toward Yi's face. He struck with full power, showing no signs of restraint. Yi stayed completely composed, showing neither fear nor hesitation. He met the incoming attack directly, countering with a punch of his own. With his extraordinary abilities, he had no reason to be intimidated by Jing Long. With the help of Satak became even stronger, while Punch lost half its force. As their fists met, a loud, sharp crack sounded through the air. His fierce expression suddenly turned to shock, caught off guard by what had just happened. This result was beyond anything he had imagined. He let out a cry of agony and stumbled back, his hand contorted unnaturally, the injury obvious. In his mind, he couldn't accept what had happened. A mere butcher shouldn't be capable of this. Beads of cold sweat dripped down his face as shock drained the color from his cheeks. Everyone knew that while life-class professions could increase a person's strength to some extent, their abilities fell far short of those from combat classes in actual fights. Even if 10 people with life-class skills joined forces, they still wouldn't measure up to a single warrior of equal level. Calmly explained that, as a butcher, he naturally possessed stronger hands, which seemed logical to him. Was pushed to the brink of madness, his thoughts swirling with rage toward Yi and a desperate urge for revenge. He let out an enraged yell as he called forth his signature weapon, the Void. The blade possessed such sharpness that it could cut through steel and iron as easily as if they were sheets of paper. The speaker demanded that the other person crawl closer and plead for forgiveness, warning that if they refused, they would have no one to blame but themselves for the consequences that would follow. In the blink of an eye, a thick layer of ice enveloped Void, rendering it immobile. A layer of frost crept over his body, freezing him in place so he could no longer move at all. Had stepped in to take action. The speaker pleaded for the others to stop, expressing a strong desire not to witness them arguing on their behalf. He witnessed the truth firsthand. The distance between them had grown so vast that they now belonged to separate worlds. For the final time, support was offered to Yi before stepping away for good. She wanted Qing to know that if sought vengeance again, he would be on his own, as she would not offer assistance. Declaring that their connection ended at that very moment, she spun on her heel and strode off without another word. He heard what she said and found himself confused. Deciding there was nothing more to do, He heard what she said and found himself confused. The setting changed, and Yi made his way by himself along the path that led to his house. Without warning, a pampered dog belonging to a wealthy woman stood in his way, preventing him from moving forward. To Yi, the scene appeared as nothing more than an overweight pig making a ruckus in the street, accompanied by its squealing piglet. The person politely asked the woman if she could manage her piglet, quickly correcting themselves to refer to it as her pet instead. Instead of a warm welcome, he was met by the loud, angry voice of a stubborn woman, who demanded to know if he owned the road and insisted she would walk wherever she wanted. Upon hearing those words, Yi let out a resigned sigh. Deciding there was no need to hold back, he warned her not to accuse him of impoliteness. Known for his wild behavior, he saw no reason to fear her. Without hesitation, he sent her beloved dog flying, its fate sealed by his merciless kick. The wealthy woman collapsed to the ground, overcome with grief as she cried out in despair over her son's lifeless body, begging him not to frighten her in such a way. After the system prompt appeared, it that a small pig had been defeated, resulting in a 0.1% increase in level and an additional 1% bonus damage from the effect. As he glanced at the system panel, excitement sparkled in his eyes. The realization dawned on him that it actually functioned. He marveled at how incredible it was, thinking the system matched his own wildness perfectly. The enraged woman hurled herself toward him, her voice rising as she accused him of killing her son and tormenting an elderly woman. She declared her determination to battle him with everything she had, even if it meant risking her own life. Reached into his pocket with a composed expression and presented his official document confirming his mental illness. Seeing that there was nothing more to discuss, the character prepared to leave, pausing briefly to check if anyone had further requests before departing. The wealthy woman stood motionless, confronted by someone who seemed unhinged. She realized that if he harmed her dog or even took her life, everything she had done would become meaningless. Within moments, she managed to put on a gentle smile, masking her true feelings. She reassured herself that there was nothing wrong, insisting it was merely coincidence that she happened to be there. With that thought, she silently bid farewell to the young man before her. The setting changed, bringing back to his house. Much to his astonishment, his parents reacted without a hint of disappointment upon discovering that he had awakened as a butcher. The advantages of working as a butcher became clear. Now, he finally had the chance to carry on his father's legacy and learn the family trade. The hours passed swiftly, and before long night had settled in. Remained deep in slumber. A dark silhouette emerged beyond the window of his parents' room. From inside, his father spoke firmly, insisting that their family be left in peace now that his son had revealed himself to be an average butcher and nothing more. The shadow let out a chilling laugh and expressed disbelief, questioning whether the boy was truly his biological child. His father's anger flared immediately after hearing those words. They repeated their warning, making it clear that returning would have consequences for which the other person could only blame themselves. Noticing the man's growing anger, the figure immediately retreated, attempting to soothe the situation. The figure reassured him that because his son was genuinely nothing more than a butcher, the organization would no longer bother their family. The shadow slipped away, dissolving quietly into the darkness of the night. The following morning, the setting moved to the slaughterhouse, where each boy's father had brought him to introduce him to the family trade. The initial challenge involved selecting the most suitable butcher's knife. Yis' gaze was instantly drawn to the blade, positioned prominently in the middle. As soon as he lifted the object, everything changed. The system displayed a message indicating that the butcher's knife had been chosen, and the divine butcher's blade was now in use. It explained that for every pig defeated using this weapon, the user would gain an additional 0.1 free attribute points. A butcher's journey always began with learning to control the knife he wielded. A plump pig, trembling with fear, let out a high-pitched squeal as it faced him. Standing behind his son, the father calmly guided him, encouraging him to attempt striking the weak spot with a single, powerful blow. His blade gleamed as he struck swiftly, claiming his first victory. The pig struggled for a moment, its body convulsing before it finally fell still, its life extinguished. After dispatching a regular pig with the butcher's knife, the system that the level increased by 1%. The bonus damage also rose by 1%, and an additional 0.1 free attribute point was awarded. Even his father couldn't hide his surprise. Although this was only his first try, the result was already remarkable, albeit lacking in accuracy. Had he targeted the carotid artery in the neck, the outcome would have been fatal in an instant. Gave a sincere nod. His father gently rested a hand on his son's head, acknowledging that while slaughtering pigs might seem monotonous and tiresome for someone so young, it was the livelihood that sustained their family. Driven by a strong desire to become more powerful, he volunteered to take charge of managing every pig in the pen. Upon hearing those words, pride lit up his father's face. He felt confident that his son was ready to take responsibility, believing he could now entrust the care of the pigs to him without any concerns. With each strike of his sword, he continued to fell pigs, causing his level to increase swiftly. He only paused to catch his breath once every drop of ink in the pen had been used up. The system displayed a notification that 49 pigs had been defeated, triggering the ability to grant a 100% bonus to damage. The character's attributes rose from 10 to 15, matching the current level of Apprentice Tier 5. As he gazed at the lines of suspended carcasses, another butcher made a light-hearted remark about how his son seemed obsessed with slaughtering pigs, having completed 7 days' tasks in just one. His father stood tall, his chest swelling with pride as he silently boasted to himself that his son had reached the legendary rank of God-tier butcher. Gazed intently at the knife resting in his palm, his mind swirling with determination. With newfound mastery over the butcher's blade, he knew the moment had come to step out into the world beyond. In this world, terrifying creatures had taken control. Nations were no more. Instead, all of humanity had come together under the rule of the Human Federation, which was split into 9 unique zones. Qing resided at the outskirts of the 5th zone. The following morning, gathered his supplies and made ready to venture outside the city gates in search of monsters. When he reached the gate, a guard halted his progress, pointing out that, as someone with a life-class profession, he could only operate within a 1-kilometer radius outside the city. The guard warned that venturing beyond this limit would put his life at serious risk, making sure the young man understood the consequences. Stayed silent, simply giving a nod to show he understood. Just as he entered the forest, he heard the sound of bushes moving behind him. A hideous goblin sprang forward, gripping a sharp dagger tightly in its hand. He wasted no time in unleashing the power of Blood Shadow Butcher. The goblin stood motionless, overwhelmed by sheer fear as the deadly aura washed over him, leaving him unable to move for a brief moment. Each person watched as he gripped his butcher's knife, waiting for the perfect moment. With a single, decisive swing, he brought everything to an abrupt end. A message appeared, announcing that the goblin pig had been defeated. The character's level increased by 5%, and the skill now dealt 1% more damage. Additionally, they gained a free attribute boost of 0.1%. Just as anticipated, the flavor of wild pork surpassed that of farm-raised meat. With meals like this, leveling up would happen quickly. In that instant, 12 sets of red eyes glimmered in the shadows, every gaze fixed intently on him. The figure called for the small piglets to reveal themselves. A swarm of goblins let out piercing screams as they rushed directly toward. With swift, powerful movements, he brought down his blade again and again, each swing ending a goblin's life. In a matter of moments, several of the creatures lay defeated at his feet. In his eyes, the act felt as ordinary as butchering livestock in a corral. Before long, just a single goblin was left, shaking with fear. The speaker expressed a desire to reunite the small piglet with its friends. Overcome with fear, the goblin spun around and sprinted away. He followed the creature quietly until he reached the entrance of a dark, shadowy cave. Observing his surroundings, he realized he had entered the goblin's nest. The cave filled with the sound of screams while, one after another, the goblins collapsed motionless onto the rocky floor. The system displayed a notification about the user's profession, identifying them as a God-tier butcher at Apprentice Tier 6. It also revealed they had received the Swine Bane bonus, granting them an additional 120% damage against pigs. At that moment, a faint, stifled cry sounded from somewhere behind him. Glanced over his shoulder and noticed that the noise was coming from behind a wooden door. With a swift motion, he lifted his foot and brought it crashing down in a single, decisive blow. The scene before him caused him to stop in his tracks for a brief moment. A young woman, her body constrained by ropes, shook with fear as she lay on the floor. Next to her, a pair of just-born goblins wailed non-stop, their cries fueled by hunger for milk. As the girl gazed at Yi, her eyes filled with tears, wordlessly begging him for rescue. Yi remained silent, quietly raising his butcher's knife. Desperation swept over the girl's features, as she believed her life was on the verge of ending. Rather than striking elsewhere, Yi's sword fell upon the 2 young goblins, swiftly bringing their lives to an abrupt end. With a swift movement, he cut through the ropes that held the girl captive. A hush settled over the area as it became clear that every last goblin had been defeated. After witnessing the defeat of every goblin, the girl rushed into Yi's embrace, her whole body trembling with overwhelming relief. The character expressed deep gratitude for being rescued, admitting that they had nearly lost everything. Answered in a straightforward manner, making it clear that rescuing the other person was not his intention. The girl showed no concern and kept moving forward by herself. She glanced at the scene and wondered if the other person was responsible for all the destruction around her. The speaker expressed amazement, assuming the other person belonged to a combat profession, and curiously wondered about their name. Once they emerged from the cave, gestured in the direction of the path leading back to the city, guiding her toward her way home. Despite her uncertainty, she trailed behind him in silence. Wasted no time in pulling out his butcher's knife, turning to confront his pursuer. With suspicion in his eyes, he demanded to know the reason for being followed, questioning whether the stranger was a spy sent by the goblins. Caught off guard, the girl quickly admitted that fear had kept her from going back by herself. She introduced herself as Xian, and explained that she had traveled to this place in search of a blood moon flower, hoping to find it in time for her mother's birthday. Rather than escaping as she had hoped, she found herself in the clutches of goblins. Thinking quickly, she proposed a bargain to her captors. The character promised that, in exchange for assistance in locating a blood moon flower, they would employ the finest blacksmith in Qing to craft a new blade for their companion. The person declared that hiring the most skilled blacksmith in would be extremely expensive. With a stern warning, they ordered the other to return home and stop trailing after them, threatening to deal with the matter personally if their command was ignored. Nan pressed her lips together in annoyance, silently complaining to herself about how she was clearly attractive, yet this man acted so distant toward her, making her wonder if something was wrong with him. She quickly chased after him, demanding to know if he had any idea of her identity, and declaring that her father was. Stood motionless, caught off guard. Led the family, which ranked among the 4 most influential clans in. As a 9th-tier expert who was nearly his resources were immense. Creating 10 of the finest butcher knives would pose no challenge for someone of his stature. His face immediately transformed, a wide, eager smile spreading across his lips as he reacted with disbelief. Held up a token with pride, explaining that it was the family's protective talisman, a gift from her father. She believed that not even a Tier 9 fighter could harm her while she had it. However, she admitted that the goblins managed to capture her only because they launched a surprise attack. Since getting close was impossible for them by any other means, they chose to imprison the narrator, believing that if they hadn't, something irreversible might have already happened. Paid no attention to her attempts at explaining. Instead, his gaze remained locked on the token, examining it closely for several moments. At last, he determined that it was authentic, a genuine artifact belonging to the family. Nodded in agreement, expressing trust that they would help find a blood moon flower, and in return, secure a top-gray blade for him. Nan swiftly extended her hand, signaling her agreement to the arrangement. Without hesitation, she reached into her bag and unfolded a map. The blood moon flower could only be found in this place, but it was also home to the blood moon python, a creature known for its deadly nature. Based on the information gathered, it appeared that the serpent possessed power comparable to a Tier 9 apprentice, leaving uncertainty about whether it could be defeated. Thoughts drifted to the fact that she had never encountered a python before. Curiosity filled her mind as she questioned whether its head might resemble that of a pig as well. With growing excitement, the character urged their companion to move faster and show them the way. Almost stumbled in surprise at his response, wondering if he had actually paid attention to her words. Despite her doubts, she realized that anyone capable of single-handedly defeating a whole tribe of goblins must possess the skills of a top-tier warrior. Despite his presence, there was something about him that seemed oddly contradictory. He appeared trustworthy, yet somehow also gave the impression that he couldn't be counted on. While the group pressed onward, a rhino with gleaming silver horns emerged in their path, radiating the formidable power of a Tier 8 apprentice. Nan quickly proposed that they should avoid any unnecessary conflict by quietly sneaking around instead. Without a moment's pause, Yi moved ahead confidently. He aimed his finger at the rhino and declared that it would feast on grass today but might attack people tomorrow, insisting that he couldn't allow it to survive. Stared in disbelief, unable to comprehend the bizarre reasoning he presented. She silently questioned how anyone could justify such an explanation. Tightened his hold on the butcher's knife and rushed directly toward the silver-horned rhino. The massive creature instantly became aware of the impending danger. With just a handful of swift movements, his blade gleamed through the air. The rhinoceros collapsed onto the earth, unmoving and without life. Size grew large with surprise. The observer questioned his own senses, unable to believe what he was seeing. In one swift motion, the stranger had defeated a creature as powerful as a Tier 8 apprentice. It seemed impossible that anyone could possess such overwhelming strength. At the same time, every system that an apprentice had reached Tier 7. The message announced that a pig had been defeated, awarding the title of, and granting a bonus of 122% extra damage. He looked down at the butcher's knife he was holding, noticing the chips along its edge, and wondered to himself how much longer the blade would last. Just then, hurried to the scene, eager to discover which profession he had gained. He wondered how anyone could defeat such a formidable beast with a single blow. Upon discovering that he was merely a butcher, holding a profession ranked only as life class, she finally understood the truth. She completely dismissed the idea, convinced that a life class could never cause something like this to happen. In an effort to prevent from bothering him any longer, nonchalantly clarified, all while removing the rhino's horn, that the animal had been suffering from a disease, which explained why it had been defeated so quickly. When noticed how composed he looked, she found herself convinced by his unbelievable story. She informed Yi that the blood moon flower was close, and guided him further into the dense forest. At the same time, the principal stepped into this section of the forest, followed closely by And. The principal remarked that the field training had been a success, and expressed pride in everyone's achievements. Long beamed with confidence, convinced that if he could just get a few more opportunities to be around, she would eventually become his. Without warning, an unusual sound caught the principal's attention from behind. In that instant, a single sharp note echoed through the air, causing everyone present to shift their focus toward the source. From afar, a pair of individuals began to appear. They soon noticed that it was Yi standing there with a girl they had never seen before. Curled his lips into a sneer, quietly insulting the other person by implying that someone of their status did not belong in that place. Yi, without pausing to consider, explained that he had only been walking through the area. At that moment, a girl dressed in yellow confidently voiced her belief that she had figured everything out. The speaker scoffed at the idea of simply moving on, believing the other person was unable to release their attachment to sister, and instead clung to her desperately, much like a leech. Appeared convinced as well, her expression twisted into a scornful sneer. The speaker reminded the other person that they no longer belonged to the same world, emphasizing once again the need to stop bothering them. His hands curled tightly into fists as he struggled to keep his temper in check, fighting the impulse to strike down the stubborn woman standing before him. At the same time, concealed a mocking expression. He still remembered how had embarrassed him before during their last encounter. Now, he was determined to turn the tables and reclaim his pride. He broke out in laughter and called out to Yi, expressing his surprise that Yi had actually appeared in person when he had been searching for him, never expecting Yi to be foolish enough to come on his own. He called forth his weapon, the blade shining with an icy glow that caught everyone's attention. One of his followers stared in awe, recognizing it as a yellow-grade, low-tier spirit weapon, a true spirit weapon. The principal gave a satisfied nod, clearly amazed that managed to transform his weapon into a spirit weapon in only 2.5 days. Despite being just a Tier 4 apprentice, now possessed enough power to challenge someone at Tier 6. Straightened, her demeanor exuding arrogance as she gave Yi a frosty reminder that she had already warned him to stay away from. She made it clear that if trouble arose again, she would not step in to help him. Leaned in and, her voice trembling with anxiety, wondered aloud if there was some unresolved conflict between them and the others. He chose not to respond to the question, and, maintaining a calm demeanor, inquired about the value of a yellow-grade, low-tier spirit weapon instead. Nan's eyes fluttered uncertainly, her mind guessing the amount might be 100,000, or perhaps 200,000 at most. She seemed unaware of just how serious her predicament had become. In the following instant, the sharp sound of metal clashing rang out, echoing as blades scraped fiercely together. brought his weapon down in a fierce arc, aiming the powerful strike directly at Yi. All of them unsheathed their butcher's knives and skillfully deflected the attacks without difficulty. The principal stared in shock, struggling to comprehend how such an outcome was possible. Despite increasing the intensity of his actions, the butcher's knife could not withstand the force of the spirit weapon any longer and broke apart, splitting into two pieces. Self-assurance grew, a sneer curling on his lips as he looked down on his opponent. In his mind, he dismissed the other as nothing more than a lowly butcher, unworthy of respect. The figure demanded that the other person drop to their knees and plead for mercy, suggesting that only then might they be granted a chance at survival. The principal understood that a normal sword stood no chance against a spirit weapon, as it would break just as easily as paper. Despite this, he chose not to step in. He had angered someone he should not have challenged. He carelessly discarded the shattered butcher's knife, his voice icy as he declared that someone like his opponent didn't even require him to use a weapon. His expression grew grim, realizing the stubbornness before him would only break when faced with the harshest consequences. With a thunderous roar, he brought his weapon crashing down in its direction. They both responded by throwing just one punch each. In a flash, his punch drove straight into his stomach. The force hurled the young man backward, propelling him through the air. He hit the floor heavily, skidding straight into the center of the gathering. Shocked murmurs and startled exclamations spread rapidly among the onlookers. The principal stood frozen in disbelief. This boy had a reputation as a genius, someone said to be able to stand his ground against a Tier 6 apprentice. But now, with a single blow, he had been knocked out cold. His followers quickly stepped in and pulled him to his feet. Although insisted he was all right under his breath, he tightened his jaw and battled to remain conscious. He knew that losing consciousness at this moment would only lead others to mock him. Just then, the principal turned his attention toward Yi, his mind stirring with an unexpected idea. Everyone listened in surprise as someone questioned, expressing disbelief, that he might have already advanced to a Tier 7 apprentice. He reached down and effortlessly retrieved the yellow-grade, low-tier spirit weapon that had left behind. The object felt more reliable than the butcher's knife, and although it wasn't perfect, it seemed strong enough for the task. The students nearby could hardly believe their eyes when they realized Yi had reached Tier 7, especially since, who was considered one of the best, was still at Tier 6. The principal hurried to offer an explanation, suggesting that such a thing could happen. Even though both life class and combat class professions were ranked within the same tier system, the ways they advanced were entirely separate. Those who chose combat careers faced harsh, relentless training from the very beginning, as their growth depended solely on fighting continuously. For this reason, their advancement tends to be gradual at first. However, after overcoming that barrier, their development speeds up dramatically. At the start, careers focused on life skills tend to be simpler. For instance, people who choose paths like alchemy or blacksmithing often find the beginning stages more manageable. There was no need for them to engage in any battles. By focusing on improving their skills, their abilities increased on their own. The principal remarked that Yi possessed exceptional butchering skills. Since his family ran a pig farm, he had likely slaughtered many animals over the last couple of days. This rapid progress at the beginning stages seemed perfectly reasonable. Upon hearing the explanation, finally understood and nodded in acknowledgement. She realized the situation, but a concern lingered in her mind about the fairness of it all, especially for those with combat professions. The principal reassured them, explaining that as time passed, life class professions would encounter much more difficult challenges when trying to level up. By that point, would be forced to defeat an incredible number of pigs merely to progress to the next stage. Despite his words, uncertainty briefly crossed his mind. The statement had been intended primarily to comfort the students. He found it remarkable, as he had never witnessed someone in a life class profession advance at such a rapid pace before. Not finding any reason to remain any longer, himself to depart. Interrupted, her voice carrying a hint of self-importance and questions motives. She wondered aloud if all his efforts, slaughtering pigs and gaining experience, were simply attempts to win her admiration. Admission to Ski Ridge Academy had already been secured for her, and she knew it wouldn't be long before she might not even cross paths with him anymore, so she wished he would stop holding on to her so tightly. He stood in stunned silence, unable to find any words. He wondered what any of this had to do with him, feeling relieved that he had finally freed himself from a stubborn woman like her. In his mind, only pigs would insist on sticking to their own kind. Unable to bear the situation any further, finally moved ahead. She resolved to defend Yi no matter what. Had arrived with the intention of assisting in the search for the blood moon flower, but instead, he found himself confronted by a group of foolish individuals. A girl standing off to the side quietly imagined her own scenario, finding it hard to believe that X, whom she considered worthless, had managed to get a new girlfriend so fast. A girl warned another to keep her distance from the boy nearby, insisting that if she didn't listen, her future would be reduced to nothing more than working alongside him, slaughtering pigs. Xian, having reached the limit of her patience, struck out and delivered a sharp slap. The blow landed with such force that it hit all 5 of them simultaneously, causing each one to stumble backward. Nobody had anticipated that her slap would impact everyone around her at once. The principal's expression seemed completely off, leaving the student confused about what had been said. The student wondered why they were being slapped as well. Untouched by violence her entire life, felt an intense fury ignite within her. She bared her teeth in anger, her eyes flashing with fury as she declared that the other person had just sealed their fate. Vowing revenge, she promised that the slap would cost them dearly. Realizing that victory through force was impossible, quickly decided to play her strongest hand. The principal stared at the token, his eyes growing wide with astonishment. He hurried ahead to block, warning that she was untouchable because she was the family's oldest daughter. The moment he faced, his face transformed, adopting a fawning grin. They tried to explain to Miss that everything had been a misunderstanding, hoping she would show mercy and let go of their mistakes. Xian spoke in a cold, sharp voice, questioning how principal's students could behave so badly. She insisted that her own feelings were not the issue. She realized that an apology to Yi was necessary. Clenched her jaw in anger, yet she held herself back from reacting. Following the strict command issued by the principal, she hesitated before quietly offering an apology to Yi. Although she remained outwardly calm, deep within her heart, she had already made a silent vow to take revenge on the family. The shame they caused her today would one day be returned to them 100 times over. Dismissed the concern with a swift gesture, assuring that everything was all right. Without lingering, he took Nan Nan by the hand and hurried to lead her away from the scene. In the corner, suddenly recalled the existence of his spirit weapon and demanded the return of his Qing foam blade. Paid no attention to him at all, silently daring the other person to try and take it himself if he was brave enough. In the end, stood powerless, forced to watch as he walked away. Anger smoldered in his eyes, and he silently vowed revenge against the so-called pig butcher. The setting changed as Yi, and arrived at the domain ruled by the blood moon python. Studied the map she held, realizing they had reached the area where caution would be necessary from that point forward. At that instant, Yi claimed the stolen Qing foam blade, declaring it as his own personal butcher's knife. The system informed the user that their personal butcher's knife had been chosen. With the activation of Edge, every pig defeated using this blade would reward an additional 0.2 free attribute points. At that moment, Yi froze in surprise when reached into her chest and produced 2 glowing orbs, one shimmering red, the other a cool blue. He gestured toward her chest, his eyes filled with curiosity as he wondered about the so-called Doraemon's pocket and tried to figure out what objects were inside it. Xian explained that the orbs were thunder fire orbs, powerful enough to seriously harm even a Tier 9 fighter if used unexpectedly. He emphasized that when the blood moon python appeared, these orbs would be crucial for their survival. Upon learning that it was intended for emergencies, chose not to press the matter any further. He resolved to move forward by himself and began to scout the area alone. With a swift jump, he touched down directly before the mouth of the blood moon python's den. To his astonishment, the entrance to the cave was fringed with blood moon flowers, and these were not ordinary ones. They were the elusive twin bloom kind. He felt a surge of fortune at the unexpected discovery. At that instant, his expression shifted to one of terror as her eyes widened, fixed on something behind him. Without warning, an enormous python with scales the color of blood materialized quietly behind every individual. He shifted his gaze in the direction from which the noise had come. Before him stood a creature resembling a serpent with the head of a pig, its presence casting a shadow over the ground. Unfazed by the intimidating figure, he spoke in a steady voice, questioning why the creature was glaring at him. He pointed out that he had only taken a single flower and expressed disbelief that the creature could be so possessive over something so small. The blood serpent stopped in its tracks, startled, as it had never before encountered a human with such bold confidence. He cared only about securing the treasure, so he quickly turned and dashed away. He continued to raise his voice urging her not to hesitate and to bring the situation to an end. Upon hearing those words, quickly grabbed hold of the pearl. Within an instant, she launched it forward using every ounce of power she possessed. A thunderous blast shattered the air, its force hurling Yi backward and knocking him off his feet. She had acted without caution, inflicting 1,000 injuries on her opponent but suffering almost as much herself, leaving her with 800 wounds. Trapped at the epicenter of the explosion, the blood serpent's body was left severely battered and torn. The creature's enormous frame shuddered several times, then it hurled itself directly over the edge of the cliff. Offered the freshly acquired blood crystal blossom to another person. His face brightened as excitement sparkled in his eyes. Unlike regular blood moon flowers, which merely delayed the aging process, the rare twin-petaled blood crystal flower offered the possibility of everlasting youth. It was a treasure any woman would deeply desire. Upon recognizing its remarkable power, each person immediately resolved that he must obtain an additional one for his mother. However, it seemed as if he intended to offer the remaining flower to her. At last, she felt a surge of relief as she realized the clueless person had finally understood. Just as both of them extended their hands toward the second flower, the injured blood serpent made an unexpected comeback. Nan stood motionless, gripped by shock. Realizing that the pearl had failed to destroy the serpent, she understood that this creature must be dangerously near the pinnacle of the 9th-rank apprentice, even if it had not yet reached the Ascension realm. As she struggled to make sense of the situation, Yi turned toward her and inquired whether she possessed another pearl like the one before. Lost her patience, feeling exasperated as she wondered aloud if others thought pearls simply grew on trees. She remembered how her father had only ever given her a single pair. With no other options remaining, Yi shifted his attention once more to the serpent. He activated his blood shadow butcher ability. In that instant, terror shone in the serpent's gaze. Helpless and vulnerable, it resembled a defenseless animal resigned to its fate. Noticed the moment of uncertainty and quickly pulled forward, muttering under his breath that this was the ideal opportunity to escape and questioning her sanity. Rather than holding him responsible, his cheeks turned pink as she admitted she had been waiting for him. She remembered that he had put his life on the line to gather the blood crystal flower just for her. None of them hesitated before quickly responding, insisting the gift wasn't meant for their friend, but for their mother instead. Stood motionless, a wave of embarrassment washing over her as if she had just made a fool of herself. Before she had a chance to think about it, the blood serpent was already slithering toward them from behind. In Yi's thoughts, having to haul this stubborn girl everywhere seemed to be a constant source of headaches. She ignored every signal and continued to complain beside him, so in a burst of frustration, he abruptly shoved her away. Terror filled his gaze as his eyes grew wide. In a flash, the blood serpent engulfed Yi completely. Suddenly regaining awareness, she was overtaken by panic and repeatedly called out his name in desperation. The serpent, sensing another opportunity for a meal, had no intention of letting her escape its hunger. At that moment, a shining sword sliced cleanly through the serpent's body. In one swift motion, the figure whirled around in a full circle, cutting the object neatly into 2 pieces. Nan remained motionless, her body rigid with shock. The creature that had almost devoured her now lay lifeless at her feet. Yi emerged from within the creature's stomach. Without hesitation, she rushed into his embrace, her voice trembling with relief as she exclaimed her gratitude that he was safe. She admitted she had feared he might become a meal for the snakes. Immediately afterward, his expression soured as she pinched her nose, her hand rising to shield herself from the unpleasant odor that lingered around. He gazed blankly at his system panel, surprised to discover that the serpent was classified as a special grade beast, which had immediately advanced him to the level of 8th rank apprentice. Soon Yi and made their way back into the town. She arrived just as an elder from the family appeared, having come to escort her. Nan retrieved the blood crystal flower, her lips curving into a gentle smile as she declared her discovery. The elder knew just how risky it was to pick that particular flower, and was ready to reprimand her for acting so carelessly. However, after she mentioned that Yi had shielded her and kept her safe from harm, the elder's attention turned to Yi at last. The elderly man, driven by instinct, inquired about who Yi was. Upon discovering that the boy was simply a regular butcher of pigs, he felt a wave of disappointment. He stifled a groan, bewildered that Miss would entrust her safety to someone with only basic life skills. The person before him appeared completely lost. Still, he wondered if this was truly the man responsible for defeating the blood serpent. Despite the uncertainty that clouded his thoughts, the elder carefully removed the golden ring from his finger. The speaker explained that the ring held a value of $200,000 and offered it as a token of gratitude for safeguarding their young mistress. He pushed the man's hand away, making it clear that he was uninterested in what was being offered. Instead, he stated that the only thing he required was a knife meant for slaughtering pigs. The elder was so stunned that he almost choked, unable to believe what he was witnessing. He wondered if the boy had lost his senses, turning down valuable treasure all because he preferred an old, rusted butcher's knife. Xian hurried to clarify that Uncle desired the most skilled weapon forger in Qing Sheng to create a spirit weapon for him, and she had already assured him that it would be arranged. Uncle wasted no time in giving his consent, confidently promising that he would take care of the matter himself. However, the urgent request from the family head to meet with meant there was no time to delay. With no other options, she raised her hand in farewell to Yi, assuring him through her actions that she would return for him one day. Before departing, Uncle's voice grew stern. He explained that while the family was willing to fulfill any request, there was one strict boundary. No one was permitted to entertain inappropriate intentions toward their young mistress. Found himself at a loss for words, silently musing that the person everyone referred to as a young lady seemed no better than a fool in his opinion. He responded immediately, assuring them to stay calm. He gave his word that he had no intention of getting involved with their young lady, explaining that his only desire was to obtain a high-quality spirit weapon. Uncle's expression at last showed contentment. He informed Yi that Master, the most skilled forger maintained a friendly relationship with the family. Promising to help, Uncle said he would recommend Yi, and that the Master would seek him out the next day. Deep inside the forest, something was unfolding. A delicate foot, smooth and green like polished jade, came to rest next to the lifeless form of the blood serpent. A chilling tone resonated as someone grumbled about their pet beast being slain and their precious spirit ginseng stolen, convinced that the culprit must be desperate for trouble. The character had committed their target's scent to memory, making it clear that escape was impossible for anyone. As those words were spoken, an overwhelming and fearsome energy burst forth, spreading rapidly over the entire area. Remained completely unaware of what was happening. He focused solely on how much profit he could make by selling the beast parts he held. His father had often reminded him that items gathered from wild creatures would always bring in good money. Entered the shop and announced why he had come. The salesgirl's eyes widened in surprise, clearly taken aback that a person so thin could have defeated a rhino. Without hesitation, she immediately proposed a price of $10,000 for the creature. Everyone fell still at once. The boy recalled that his father earned just 100 by butchering an entire pig. Realization dawned on him, this one rhino horn could fetch the same price as 100 pigs. Without warning, he noticed an object hidden behind the counter that drew his gaze. He wondered whether offering 10,000 would be sufficient to purchase it. The clerk described the item as a soft armor made from the scales of a fire serpent, its surface shimmering with a golden hue. According to the clerk, this armor offered outstanding protection and had the added benefit of keeping its wearer comfortable, whether in freezing cold or scorching heat. Upon learning the price was $150,000, he was left in shock. He realized that for his father to afford such an amount, it would require the slaughter of 1,500 pigs. With that idea in mind, he forcefully placed spirit weapon on the counter, silently wondering whether offering this item might serve as a better trade. The salesgirl immediately identified the item as a basic yellow-tier spirit weapon. Grinning brightly, she dressed Yi in the golden scale armor, remarking that it seemed as if the armor had been created just for him. Though she kept her thoughts hidden, she marveled at the boy's impressive collection of rare treasures. She suspected he must belong to an elite combat class. The idea crossed her mind that, if she could win his favor, her future would be secure and comfortable forever. She quickly started hovering around him, pointing out that a transaction of this sort usually came with a handling fee of 10,000. Because of his striking good looks, she decided to let it slide, as long as he promised to repay her kindness in some way. At the same time, she insisted on discovering what job he held. Replied in a relaxed manner, referring to himself as a pig butcher. Caught off guard, the salesgirl stood perfectly still. Although her mind had raced through countless scenarios, she had never once considered that he might simply be a butcher. Not long after, he made his way back to his house, where he presented the blood crystal flower to his mother. At first, she was stunned, but the feeling quickly shifted to doubt. She found it hard to believe her son had come by such a valuable item by himself. The thought crossed her mind that he might have taken it without permission. Each person rushed to clarify their innocence, insisting they had not gone outside the city. One recalled witnessing two enormous snakes battling, and upon spotting a flower on the ground, simply picked it up without thinking much of it. His mother seized his face firmly, her eyes filled with worry as she chastised him. She reminded him of the dangers lurking beyond the city walls, emphasizing that their family were merely butchers, not heroes. The thought of something terrible happening to him was more than she could bear. The mother firmly warned her children that they would not be permitted to go next time. Hearing this, the children quickly agreed, each one nodding their heads in understanding and silently promising not to repeat their mistake. However, his father had a different perspective. He proudly acknowledged actions, expressing his approval for his son with enthusiastic praise. Suddenly, an angry voice erupted from outside the house, demanding that come out immediately. Who was father, and once a close companion of his own father during their youth, arrived at the scene. Now recognized throughout the town as a formidable 6th-rank Ascension Realm warrior, he had traveled there with the intention of retrieving the spirit weapon on behalf of his son. His brow furrowed in concern as he quickly responded, questioning whether an error had occurred. Everyone knew his son specialized in practical trades, making it hard to believe he would ever be involved in the theft of a spirit weapon. Extended his finger toward Yi and loudly accused him, declaring in front of everyone that Yi was responsible for taking the item. His expression grew grim at once. He wondered how his longtime companion could remain so oblivious, unable even to manage his own child. Now, with accusations of theft surrounding the boy, insisted that his friend question his son about the truth of the matter. Witnessing his father being disrespected in that moment, realized it was his responsibility to take action. He fixed his gaze on, his finger aimed directly at him, and declared with an icy tone that son had attempted to take his life. He explained that he had merely taken the young man's weapon in return, insisting that this response was already showing mercy. Grew anxious and quickly explained that he only wanted to have a friendly match with Yi, carefully hiding the real reason from everyone. Demanded that the weapon be surrendered immediately, warning that only out of respect for the person's father would he overlook the offense this time. Responded in a monotone, explaining that the blade had already been purchased by someone else. At that moment, an eerie hush swept over the entire room. Upon discovering that his son's spirit weapon had been sold, became furious. Without hesitation, he insisted on receiving 1 million as compensation and threatened to disregard their long-standing friendship if his demand was not met. His father understood that a spirit weapon of the yellow tier and lower grade typically cost around $200,000. With this in mind, he hoped to convince to accept a lower price. Despite only possessing the power of a 6th Ascension realm cultivator, boldly declared that failure to hand over the money would force him to claim someone's life as payment. He nearly lost his temper at the shocking request, but his father intervened, calming him down. Without protest, his father agreed to the unreasonable condition and explained that he only required some time to collect the million. Shot a cold, mocking glance over his shoulder as he departed, making it clear that unless the money was prepared within 2 weeks, he would become an enemy and sever their relationship completely. With that decision made, he gathered up his son Long and strode away with a confident air. Soon after, in the living room, Yi's mother paced nervously, pressing his father to come up with a plan. Despite her pleas, both parents knew that even if they sold all their possessions, it would still be impossible to raise enough money. Realizing he had caused difficulties for his family, Yi moved closer to reassure them. He tried to ease their concerns, promising that he would find a solution to the problem. Rather than placing blame on his son, the father spoke sincerely, stressing that whatever challenges might arise, his son should never face them by himself. He assured him that his family would always stand by his side. He felt a powerful surge of emotion and came to a clear realization. He needed to secure a spirit weapon as soon as possible and increase his abilities to reach the Ascension realm. By doing this, he would ensure that could no longer endanger him. Without warning, his mother questioned, suspecting he was keeping secrets from them. She pointed out that the flower he had brought home was very unusual and doubted that someone with his humble occupation as a butcher could have obtained such a rare item. Realized that hiding his unusual condition could not last indefinitely, so he chose to confess the truth about it at last. As soon as his parents heard someone mention the word, "strange," they immediately stopped moving, caught off guard by the remark. His mother regained her composure before anyone else, and she inquired if, by calling him strange, he was suggesting that he did not have an interest in women. He gave a small nod to show his agreement. She reached out without hesitation, softly running her hand over his hair to soothe him. She assured him that everything was all right, accepting the possibility that her son might be attracted to men. She encouraged him to pursue his own happiness with confidence and courage. However, she warned her to keep her distance from her father. As the situation quickly slipped beyond their control, everyone rushed to clarify themselves, insisting that they weren't attracted to men or women. Instead, they confessed to having a strange mental condition that caused them to see every living being as a pig. Upon hearing those words, his parents stood motionless, caught off guard once more. Just a moment after, the boy's father blurted out a realization. He wondered aloud if seeing every creature as a pig would allow his son to treat all living beings as if they were pigs ready for slaughter. Upon listening to his father's remarks, found himself nodding without thinking. In his father's view, Yi's circumstances had moved beyond those of a typical career, prompting him to pass down genuine expertise to his son. That night, the boy's father guided him far into the mountains, explaining that he planned to teach his son a unique butcher's blade technique he had invented on his own. After mastering this skill, Yi would possess enough strength to defend himself, even in situations where his life was threatened. He knew that no sum of money, not even $1 million, could ever compare to the importance of keeping his son safe. The Blade R was made up of just 3 techniques, all grounded in a philosophy of pure simplicity. The man's father clutched the butcher's knife tightly and inhaled slowly, steadying himself. He lifted the sword high over his head. He raised his arm and pointed toward the dark expanse above. He brought his weapon down in a powerful, determined arc. He was taken aback when the unremarkable blow tore through the darkness, unveiling a sky glittering with countless brilliant stars. He stood frozen in disbelief, his mouth hanging open as if he couldn't trust what his eyes were showing him. His father, maintaining a composed demeanor, informed him that the initial attack was known as Falling Star. Afterward, he got ready to showcase the next technique. Without warning, he sprang upward, soaring through the air with incredible speed. The butcher gripped his knife tightly, and as he swung it, a flash of pale blue lightning shot out from the blade. In a split second, as the attack known as Fallen Moon struck, the moon hanging overhead was sliced neatly into two halves. He stared in disbelief, his perception of reality crumbling as he looked at the figure before him. He struggled to accept that the person standing there could truly be his father, finding the situation beyond comprehension. Noticing the surprise on his son's face, the father clarified that what they saw was merely a bending of space, which made everything appear folded. The third strike bore the ominous name of Devouring Sun. The butcher's knife arced swiftly through the air in an unexpected motion. A menacing power slammed into the earth, causing the ground to burst apart in a fierce blast. He found the exaggerated movements impossible to ignore and remarked with a teasing grin that he wondered whether these techniques were truly designed for butchering pigs, or if they were actually intended to defeat someone as formidable as Marshall. His father instructed him to study quietly, insisting that he shouldn't question anything. He assured his son that one day these skills would become valuable. Without hesitation, he passed the butcher's knife over to Yi and directed him to begin his training right away. The instant Yi wrapped his fingers around the seemingly simple butcher's knife, its weight pressed down on him as if it were a massive object weighing 2 tons. Despite possessing the power of an 8th-rank apprentice, he found himself pinned helplessly to the ground by its overwhelming force. It was astonishing to realize that his father had been wielding such a heavy blade for butchering all this time. Despite his trembling hands, Yi recalled his father's cautionary words and nervously raised the knife, getting ready to attempt the initial move known as Falling Star. He had misjudged how much his body could handle, and as a result, he fell to the ground once more. His father concealed himself behind a tree, quietly grumbling that his son was a foolish child. Yet someday, if the boy ever attained the sovereign realm, those 3 strikes would be powerful enough to defeat both gods and mortals.